Here it is. One of the most annoying arguments I've heard people make against trans and non binary people is there's only two sexes, it's just basic biology. And the fact that that's their argument really tells me that they don't really know much about biology. When you're first learning the very, very basics of biology, you're learning about XY and XX, chromosomes and how that makes a boy or a girl. And yeah, that's a very, very absolute basic intro understanding of biology. But it's a lot messier than that. But unfortunately, a lot of people don't understand that biology doesn't just stop there. It's a little bit more complex than XY equals boy and XX equals girl. Real biology is a little bit more complicated than that. So we're going to talk about some biology today. Let's start from the very beginning. The human genome is 23 pairs of chromosomes, for a total of 46 individual chromosomes. When the reproductive cells, or gametes, or sperm and egg, are formed, they only have half of each pair. And when the egg gets fertilized, each of those chromosomes then finds their partner to reform their pairs, giving you 46 total chromosomes, the 23 pairs, half of which comes from one parent, half of which comes from the other parent. Now, that process generally goes pretty smoothly, and for the most part, most people have exactly 23 pairs of chromosomes, but occasionally things get a little bit messy, and it doesn't always go that way. Sometimes the chromosomes won't separate while the gametes are forming, and so you can end up with an extra chromosome or you can end up missing a chromosome. One of the most well known examples of this is Down syndrome. If you have an extra chromosome in your 21st pair, that can result in Down syndrome. So having too many or too few chromosomes can lead things to deviate from the norm a little bit. Now, when this happens with the sex chromosomes, which is the 23rd pair, a person can end up having two X's and a Y, or an X and two Ys. There's a ton of different ways that this can happen, and it can lead to a variety of different things, but it pretty much always affects the sexual development of that individual. I don't have the time or the knowledge to talk about every single possible thing that can happen. But if you are interested in learning more, two of the most common ones are called Turner syndrome and Klinefelter syndrome. And I'll have a link in the description where there's an article that kind of goes a little bit more into those things. So, as the embryo develops, at about the 8th week is when the genitalia will start to form. And that's usually determined by the presence or lack of certain hormones. But that's not always the case. The hormone levels can be affected by a number of different things. The embryo can respond to these different hormones a number of different ways. There's a lot of genetic things that kind of go into consideration when you're talking about how an embryo produces and responds to hormones. Even if an embryo is either XX or XY, there are other things that can affect that individual in their development that can then result in an intersex condition. For example, if there's an excess of male hormones, it can cause the development of some more male appearing features. So an embryo can develop looking one way, but internally be very different. Now, of course, it doesn't necessarily just look one of two ways. A lot of times, things can look very ambiguous. Things cannot match on the inside and on the outside. There's a lot of different ways that this can happen. Babies born with intersex conditions usually have a mix of male and female characteristics. Sometimes they're born one way, but then later in life, when they hit puberty, things can kind of start developing in a different direction. So, again, there's a lot of ways that these things can kind of manifest themselves. You probably have met an intersex person and not even realized it. Heck, you might have someone that is a close friend or family member that's intersex. So these people are out there, and there's a lot of them. So the moral of the story is that basic biology doesn't really exist. In the real world, biology is messy. There aren't just two sexes. There's a lot. There's a lot of gray area in there. And most of the population, sure, it's male or female. and live their entire life like that. That's fine. But there are also a lot of people that don't fit into that category. So, no, there aren't just two sexes. It's not as clearly defined as a lot of people want to say it is. That's just how biology works. But these people that are saying that, oh, it's just basic biology, yeah, that's why you don't understand it, is because you didn't get past a first grade understanding of biology. That's okay. Not everybody needs to know a lot about biology. Before you talk about these things, make sure you actually do a little bit of research. And if you're going to be talking about biology, you maybe want to have more than just a basic understanding of it. If you liked this video, if you thought it was educational, if you thought it was interesting, or if you want to learn more about this stuff, like and subscribe. And put in the comments what other questions you might still have. I might do another video talking about the differences of sex and gender, and about how gender really historically is very fluid, and how those gender lines have really changed throughout the course of human history. It's a lot of really interesting stuff and some really cool subjects. Okay, bye.